for the fastest 2 hours in sports talk radio. Get ready for Chase Robinson.
He has got to be a player they can rely on in big situations.
And Gerhard Mathangani.
Has the trust of his team. Sounds like the makeup of his team is in a really good space, and I believe that's because of the culture he's curated down there.
For WKXX Live, these guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
Happy Thanksgiving Eve here on WKXX Live. Wednesday pre-Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving means we got some very meaningful football coming up, and we will be talking about that over the next couple of hours. Basketball as well. And no show tomorrow. We'll be enjoying our Thanksgiving. We'll be back with you on Friday afternoon to preview rivalry weekend. Chase and Gerhard here with you this afternoon until 4 o'clock. As we got lots to get to as far as college football, college basketball. We'll get into some high school football as well. We'll start with the college football playoff rankings. As we expected, they would stay the same. No reason to change those top four. And Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, TCU holding down the fort there in the top four.
Yeah, I think the only way we would have gotten a change is if one of those teams had lost. Now, I know TCU barely scraped by and Michigan barely scraped by, but I didn't see any scenario where they'd throw TCU a little bit ahead of Michigan or the other way around. Not necessarily those were great opponents, but Illinois was a solid opponent. They were ranked, earlier in the season, not ranked in the latest poll. But this is to me is about what we expected, and I think the biggest news was behind the top four, and kind of where some of the teams that are in the SEC and otherwise were slated, because you get a glimpse now about what the committee thinks about these teams before we go to rivalry week, because this week we will obviously have some differences once teams fall after the final week of the regular season.
Yes. So LSU comes in at number 5. USC at 6, Alabama at 7, Clemson 8, Oregon 9, and Tennessee 10. Do you have an issue with any of those?
I don't have an issue with it. I do see how maybe if you are a fan of USC, you think that, hey, their win over UCLA probably should have got them a little bit more respect and probably ahead of a 2-loss LSU football team. I get that. I think on a neutral site, LSU is a hair better than USC, and that's all you could judge. You could just judge the 11 games they've played so far. Now, if I'm trying to push it forward, then I do think LSU is a little bit better. So I don't have a problem with it. I did find it a little interesting though that you had LSU and Alabama basically obviously in the top 7, but Tennessee dropped down 5 spots considering the fact that they lost their starting quarterback in the game. Now, of course, they got drilled in the contest, but being behind Oregon and behind Clemson and, of course, behind Alabama to me was really interesting.
Should Tennessee be ahead of Alabama, you think? Because of the head-to-head, of course, Tennessee won that one. Do you see a case for them being ahead of Alabama?
I don't, because if you take Alabama's losses in a vacuum, it's 2 plays essentially, and one of them is at Tennessee.
Yeah.
If you take Tennessee's losses in a vacuum, one is an egregious loss that you obviously cannot forgive. So yes, even given the resume of the head-to-head, this is why we have committees to be able to bring the nuanced discussions in here, and that's a part of the nuanced discussion of, hey, not every 2-loss team, even if the 2-loss team beats the other one head-to-head, they're not similar as far as their overall resume.
Yeah, great point there. Again, no changes at the top, but lots to focus on this 5 through 10. If you'd like to chime in, you can give us a call, 256-413-1029. Your thoughts on the college football playoff rankings as we head into rivalry weekend. LSU is number 5. What is their only path beating Georgia?
Yeah, they have to win out. To me, that's their only path. I do think 2 losses and no conference championship. Actually, now it'll be 3 losses without a conference championship. You're done. You have to knock off Georgia, and I do think even after knocking off Georgia, some some other things probably need to play out. I think they're in, but if we get like a barn burner between Ohio State and Michigan, and then the winner of that game goes and handily wins the Big Ten, and I do think that opens a channel for the loser of that game to still find their way in. I still think Georgia finds their way in as well, even with that one loss being a conference championship game. So, yes, beating Georgia is, to me, it's the bottom floor. Probably still needs some other things to transpire as well in order to solidify LSU's spot there. But the committee has already said, they've already said a bunch of times, we respect conference championships. So there ain't no way a 2-loss team without a conference championship, a 3-loss team without a conference championship is getting in.
So, Jeremy called us a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was last week, and said, does Alabama have a chance to be in the college football playoff? I would have said absolutely not. There is a small path with a lot of chaos. I think we could see Alabama get in.
It's a lot of chaos, but it's not unthinkable chaos. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think Alabama fans, for the most part, and just the national talking points were like, so many other dominoes have to fall. We don't see this as a possibility. But when you take a look at where Alabama's seated, they're seated number 7. So basically, you do the math, you need 3 teams ahead of you to fall. And I think it's not just falling; it's the way that they fall. I think if you're an Alabama fan, you got to root for Notre Dame this weekend to knock off USC. That really, really helps. Georgia knocking off LSU really helps as well in the SEC championship game. And then I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we get a blowout or maybe even a 2 or 3 touchdown game in the game between Ohio State and Michigan if that doesn't, bolster them a little bit. So there is a crooked path, a narrow path, but yeah, there still is an opportunity here based on the way that they placed Alabama at number 7 in these polls, as opposed to maybe 8 or 9, which I would have thought that the road would have been a lot harder.
Yeah, and I think this does give Alabama a small chance maybe to find themselves back in it. Let's pretend last week that TCU lost, that they weren't able to get that field goal off.
Right.
Who would be in that number 4 spot right now? Would it be LSU?
Probably LSU. I would think LSU. They're in that 4 spot. USC would be 5 with just USC rooting for Georgia. USC needs to take care of business of their own. I mean, they got a lot. They got some big games ahead. They got the Pac-12 championship game, and they got to play Notre Dame. That's no walk in the park there for the Trojans. But yeah, I do think that if TCU would have lost, we probably would have seen TCU just ahead of Alabama, but still out of that top 5. So maybe USC or maybe TCU at number 6, LSU at 4, USC at 5, TCU at 6, Bama at 7. I don't think that TCU, had they lost that game, would be behind Alabama with that one loss, and especially, let's just say they missed the field goal. But at the same time, too, TCU's path is not, a guaranteed either. A really dangerous Iowa State team. When they want to play offense, they're actually pretty decent. Then they still got to win the Big 12 championship game as well.
So chaos could happen. It does happen. It seems like every year.
Yeah.
And so I think we are in for a fun weekend. Just the way the last couple of weekends have played out, and really a lot of games this season, I think we could be in for an interesting rivalry weekend. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I am too. And I really like the parity now of college football. I do like the fact that we do have 2 elite teams. I'll say 1 elite team, 1 very, very, very good team. I think Michigan's a little bit one-dimensional for me, but to have that going on in the Big Ten, to have what we have in the SEC with Alabama and Georgia and LSU, to have what we have in the Pac-12 with USC, to have what we have right now in the Big 12 with TCU. I like the state of college football right now. The state of college football to me is whenever you do have a little bit of parity, even though I still think top to bottom or even the upper crust, the SEC is still the top dog, as it shows with 3 teams in the top 7.
Yes, and so we'll be keeping an eye on next Tuesday night what happens as more rankings of the college football playoff are released. We will dive into the Iron Bowl in just a few minutes. We like to see what the other side is saying. Well, the other side is each other this week. So we'll have a chance to hear from Bryce Young and Derek Hall, both guys who played in this game last year. And I think that'll be an interesting factor of thinking back to last year when it comes to this Iron Bowl. Coming up at 3 o'clock, we'll be talking Iron Bowl with Kevin Skarbinski. He's covered a number of these games over the years for the Birmingham News, the Post-Herald, AL.com now with the lead. And so we'll talk Iron Bowl with Kevin Skarbinski, and we'll talk the Iron Bowl with Mark Everett Kelly, former ESPN researcher. We will do that coming up at 3:30. So a packed hour 2. So sit back and enjoy as we get you ready for a weekend of football. We'll talk Iron Bowl coming up next. Stick around here on WKXX Live.
Oh, 2.9.
Fox Sports 102.9. It is WKXX Live. Chase and Gerhard here with you on this day before Thanksgiving. Got the Egg Bowl tomorrow night. It could be a very meaningful Egg Bowl. Ole Miss trying to get 3 straight. Mm-hmm. Mississippi State has played relatively good football this year as well. I think it could be a good game depending on where one head coach's head is during the game, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the big if on this one. And obviously, when we first had the news that Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin were going to be the head coach of these respective schools, we just knew that the hype for this game, that the talk about the game, the talk about the chatter, would just be so fun. But now it's been clouded by all of the Auburn stuff that we haven't had the hype that we thought that we would get in this game year to year. Auburn hype this year. You had the COVID year. It's just been, it hasn't always had that same level of juice that we were expecting when both coaches signed on to be the head coach with the Bulldogs and the Rebels respectively. So I'm expecting a fun game. I think a lot of people will be watching this game between the lines, not necessarily between the white lines, but between the lines of the way it's called, the body language, the energy, everything non-football related here in this matchup.
Yeah, and I bet you when Kiffin and Leach go out there for their pregame talk, I bet Mike Leach just straight up asked him if he's going to Auburn.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No doubt about it. And he probably won't even hide it either. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he doesn't even hide it. Just like, you know what? Just go ahead and tell me, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then you have lip readers out there being like, oh, wait, I think I saw Auburn. I think I saw him say Auburn leave his mouth.
Yeah, so that'll be something to watch. But you know, you got to wonder what the conversations between those two are like pregame too. Very interesting coaches both in the state of Mississippi, but here in the state of Alabama, we got the Iron Bowl coming up this weekend, and of course, last year Alabama was favored. They go into Jordan-Hare, and the game did not go anything like people thought it would.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, obviously expected a big, Bama win, Bama cruise to a victory. But we talked about this a little bit last year on different platforms, that this game just always is just so different. And I know a lot of people like to use the cliched line of throw the records out and whatnot, but this game seems to have an aspect of that, especially at Auburn when Auburn's an underdog, and it felt like it played out that way last year. And then you had that, the 4 overtimes. Auburn kind of played above their heads there in that matchup. It looked like Alabama at the beginning of the game where they were just basically trying to get comfortable with the scheme that they were running and be able to come away with a win. They knew, we win, we go to Atlanta, we got a shot if we beat Georgia. Obviously, all those things did transpire, but Auburn gave them a run for their money for sure. Yeah,
they did, and made for a really entertaining Iron Bowl. I've been spending a lot of time on the Auburn message boards here the last few weeks, and it's funny. I was looking today, and there was not a single thread on the first 2 pages of the message board talking about this game. Auburn fans, I feel like, are not even looking forward to this game because they got a coach on their mind.
Yeah, well, even in casual conversations, the big thing is that Auburn knows, hey, we will have a new head coach next year. Auburn also knows this game in Bryant-Denny and this game at Jordan-Hare feels like 2 different games. Now, Auburn can have the same intensity as they did before, but it feels like 2 different games usually. So I do think a lot of Auburn fans, for the most part, have punted on this Iron Bowl being a W. Now, obviously, you want to go out and look good and whatnot, but the key thing now is the head coach. And the fact that the head coach search, the reported top name on the top of the list, just happens to be the guy that put Alabama on that next wave. Offensively, you'll hear Nick Saban talk about this all the time, just how Lane really helped revolutionize the way that offense is run at Alabama. There's a lot of factions of Alabama people that think Lane Kiffin is going to be the successor to Nick Saban. You add all these wrinkles in there, then I can see Auburn fans not being that excited about the 4 quarters on Saturday, much more about maybe the 4 years with possibly Lane Kiffin.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. But I think, hype around this game is always going to be there. Obviously, it's the Iron Bowl. It's, to me, the greatest rivalry in college football, in all of college football. And, this is possibly the final game for Bryce Young, for Will Anderson, 2 of the most dynamic college football players
right
of this time. They're at Bryant-Denny Stadium. in front of their home fans who have grown to love them the last few years. That's definitely, I'm sure, going to be on their minds tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, and they've said all the right things in the media. Bryce Young was asked about it, and he obviously said he's focused on this week. But he did talk about a little bit about balancing the hype of this game, understanding how big it is, not just using the throwaway line of it's just like any other game. Not doing that, but at the same time, not getting too suckered into all the hype of this game. There's a real balancing point there, and Bryce Young kind of shared his thoughts about the way that he views this game as he moves forward, balancing all the pregame hype with the fans' hype and everything else.
I definitely don't ignore it. Again, this is a huge, huge game. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to all the former players, to all the alumni. It means a lot in the state. So, again, this is something that's really big for us, me individually. So, I understand that. I don't shy away from that. Again, it's a huge game. This is a big rivalry game that means a lot. So I understand that. But with that as well, I understand it's my responsibility to do what I have to do during the game, before the game, to put myself in the best situation, us as the best situation as a team to be successful. So for me, it's just finding the headspace to understand, the gravity of the situation, the moment, but to be centered and be at my best to play and to perform. So that's really where my head's at before the game.
It was a year ago that Bryce Young led the team 99 yards down the field in the last 2 minutes to get a touchdown and to send that thing into overtime at just as cool and calm as he could be. Mm-hmm. And that's, we saw some great moments from him last year, but that's when I realized, like, this guy's the real deal. Like, he is the best in college football.
Yeah, no doubt. And you understood up until that point that he was one of the better guys as far as his arm talent goes and everything else, like just the God-given skills that you have to have and the stuff that you work on. But that game, you saw it upstairs. You saw it mentally that he's got the it. Whatever that it is, he's got it as a leader of men, as a leader of a football team. And obviously college scouts, not college, but professional scouts immediately loved him after that. Zoomed it to the top of most draft boards after this year. You saw the exact same characteristics play out in the Texas game earlier this year. So it's something that he has maintained. But yeah, he understands. I think he's probably, from a cerebral standpoint, probably one of Alabama's best quarterbacks that they've probably ever had, being able to balance those two things. No moment ever feels too big. And that game was just kind of the classic example of that.
Yeah. So from the Auburn side of things, last year was, again, they were big underdogs.
Yep.
They took this thing to 4 overtimes. Gary Danielson, I'm interested to see, maybe we need an over-under on how many times he talks about Tank Bigsby running out of bounds last year in this year's broadcast, because he said about 30 in last year's after it happened. But it really, if Tank Bigsby hadn't run out of bounds, then the clock may have run out, and Iron Bowl could have been very different. So yeah. I think this year or last year's Iron Bowl is going to be on this year's team's mind for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it's both sides of it. Auburn didn't really play all that well in the game. If you remember, Auburn rushed for 22 yards in the football game and didn't really have a great day passing as well. 7 penalties in the game. But one thing they did play is they played with an energy. They played with a juice. They kind of played with a reckless abandon on defense. They really made life tough for Bryce Young. Got to him a lot of times, pressured him a lot of times, sacked him a few. And they were able to kind of use that energy and use that juice. And so Derek Hall, who's going to be a high pick in the first round of the NFL draft, he talked a little bit about that and said that they basically need to replicate that energy. They need to come back with that same juice, that same momentum and intensity into this year's Iron Bowl that they did last year when they were at home.
They have a prolific offense. They have really good running back. They have good receivers all over the field. And obviously the quarterback himself, Bryce Young, Heisman Trophy winner, possibly another candidate for this year. And he's been nothing short of amazing in his career. So, it's going to be huge for us to get after the O-line and, try to come out and put our best foot forward. And, like you said, last year, we wreaked havoc, and that's another opportunity that we get a chance to go do again. So lay it all on the line. We win. We get a bowl game. We don't. We fought for Auburn. We have nothing to lose. And, like you said, we are playing with house money. We just go out and put our best foot forward and, go out and put ourselves in position to try to win this football game, be in a dogfight for 60 minutes because, I mean, that's what it takes. In the Iron Bowl, score don't matter, record don't matter, none of that matters. It's about who wants it more that day. And, like I said, the Iron Bowl is the best college football rivalry ever. I'm sorry. So to be able to have the opportunity to go out and play in that game with these guys is going to be good.
Derek Hall there for Auburn, getting ready for the Iron Bowl. And, there's some rain moving through. Chance it'll be raining during the game. Do you think that changes the game plan at all? I mean, Alabama passing team, Auburn the running team.
Yeah, I think it really kind of helps Auburn. I think we have a little bit of the same thing playing out possibly in the Ohio State-Michigan game. Michigan team likes to run as well. So I think Auburn, this really favors them because Auburn does not put the ball in the air a ton. And they really like to, kind of muddy it up a little bit. And so, I do believe that any weather that comes through kind of helps out Auburn. Even though I do believe that Alabama will make life very difficult running the football. Probably still have to make some plays there in the air. And then defensively, it's all about effort. It's all about effort and enthusiasm. And Derek Hall, nobody will remember this 15 years from now, but he had one of the better defensive games in a losing effort for Auburn last year. 3 sacks in the game, 6 overall tackles, 3 sacks in the contest. They lost the game, so that nobody, like I said, nobody will remember it. But he understands the intensity is there. So if they can create maybe a turnover or two, they don't have as many penalties, and they really shorten the game by running the football. I think that the weather does really help out Auburn.
Yeah. So that'll be something to watch on Saturday. But the Iron Bowl coming up Saturday afternoon at 2:30. Again, we'll be talking with Kevin Skarbinski coming up at 3 o'clock. And Mark Everett Kelly coming up at 3:30. Want to talk some SEC and some teams around the state coming up next. Check in with the Sun Belt Conference USA. Our teams from the state of Alabama. Look at the FCS playoffs. We'll do all that coming up next.
The Press Box.
Fox Sports 102.9, Chase and Gerhard here with you as we move through this Wednesday afternoon. Get ready for Thanksgiving coming up tomorrow. Got some great football coming up this weekend. We were talking about the Iron Bowl, but some of our other in-state teams are closing out the regular season this weekend. You think we got Troy, South Alabama, UAB all in FBS, and we've got a couple of FCS teams playing as well or heading into the postseason. But let's start with the folks over in the Sun Belt. The Troy Trojans, 9-2 on the year, 6-1 in conference play. They're on the road at Arkansas State to wrap up this season. Now, we've been keeping up with Troy, especially after that win over South Alabama, when they kind of put themselves in position to win that division there. They've, obviously they've lost 2 games overall, and they've lost 1 in conference play, but they've been impressive this year. And you gotta tip your hat to John Summerall coming in his first season and having the success that they're having.
No doubt. I think that this is a Troy football team that is playing really confidently. We talked about on our college football kickoff show, talked about Marshall, their linebacker, is just unbelievable, and he's having a fantastic season and career. And Troy is now on the doorstep of being able to lock in a conference championship. Troy's 9-2 on the year. Meanwhile, South Alabama is also 9-2. So both teams right there have a shot at, double-digit wins and probably one of the best seasons in school history. But because of the game you just mentioned earlier, the fact that Troy beat them on the field, Troy just basically has, they only have themselves to worry about. They don't got a scoreboard watch this week with everybody else to see, can we afford to lose? No. They're in the situation where they can lock it up themselves, and so it's been really fun to see both in-state teams just do really well. And they had another opportunity this week. They'll be a big favorite against Arkansas State to knock off Arkansas State. It's a tough game though. It's in Jonesboro. It's a really tough place to go get a win. But I really like what Troy's done so far, and like you said, they're in the driver's seat.
Yeah, and clinched a bowl game early in the year. And we'll look at bowl projections for the Trojans in a minute, but had a chance to hear from the head coach, John Summerall, this week.
Yeah, he talked a little bit about that factor of controlling your own destiny and just how important that is for this team because of the fact that, the West is so tight. The division is really, really tight there with South Alabama there, sitting there with the exact same record at 6-1. But of course, Troy with the win, and then some of the other teams that are in that division playing really well right now. But John Summerall just talked about the fact that, hey, they're playing really good defense so far, and everything as far as controlling is still up to them, so they can control their own destiny and their kind of approach this week as they look to go 10-2.
Yeah, the nice thing is we're in control of our own destiny of winning the West. We play at 2:00. Doesn't really matter when anybody else plays to me. We play at 2:00 in Jonesboro, Arkansas. If we win that game, we can have an opportunity to do something special. If we don't, then we're going to be relying on other people. We'd love to host, but I got no control over all that stuff. I mean, I want to get to the championship game, and the only way to do that is take care of the target that's right in front of you, not worrying about the one that's down the road. And we got one opportunity this week. If we don't take care of it, we're going to be saying coulda, shoulda, woulda, and don't want to have that feeling. Don't want to live in regret.
Troy looking to take care of business this week as they take on Arkansas State. It comes in at 3-8. Kind of where they have Troy projected right now as far as a bowl game is the New Orleans Bowl, and they have them projected playing North Texas. We saw North Texas play UAB a couple of weeks ago. Very good football team. So right now, Troy projected to play in the New Orleans Bowl.
Yeah, that's according to the good people over at Action Network, and they have a bunch of bowl projections, and we'll get to some of the more juicier ones as we roll along in the show. But yeah, obviously a really nice it'd be a nice bowl for Troy if they're able to take care of that game. Possibly, maybe even a little bit of a higher profile game, a bigger marquee game, if they're able to win the Sun Belt Conference altogether. So win this game, go to 10-2, and possibly get a conference championship. Another chance to even to up the ante a little bit more, even with their bowl projections. So obviously a really good really good situation setting up right now for the Troy Trojans, who, as we said, do not have to look over their shoulder this upcoming week.
Yeah, and so the other team of the Sun Belt here in the state of Alabama goes down to Mobile, or they are in Mobile, South Alabama. Old Dominion comes to Hancock Whitney Stadium this week. Old Dominion, just like Arkansas State, 3-8. South Alabama 9-2, 6-1 in the conference, and that one conference loss, of course, coming to the team we just talked about in the Troy Trojans.
They are now literally one game away from making history there at South Alabama and winning double-digit games for the first time ever. Now, the largest to this point has been 6. So once they got bowl eligible and once they won that 7th game, they've been making history ever since then. Another big game this week, just like with Troy, they'll be the big favorite to win the football game when they take on Old Dominion. But this Old Dominion team is a really solid team. Earlier in the year, they were just outside the top 25 in the country. The wheels have kind of fallen off for ODU. But it's a solid football team. But South Alabama have a chance to make some history and win 10 games for the first time ever. And, of course, probably still needing Arkansas State to knock off Troy in order to get the division crown. Yeah. But the 10 wins, the possibility of 10 wins is something that is unbelievable for this program and their head coach, Kane Womack. Talk about it.
You look at this team and this program, and we've had some great moments in our short history for sure. But the overall on-field success in terms of record is exciting to see where we're headed. 7 wins is that's more than what we've ever had in program history. And so to kind of be able to talk about that with our guys every week, they're making history. And so to go from 7 to 8 to 9, now an opportunity to go to 10, that's really special. And that's something that, when you think about this week being our senior day, for these seniors to set a new standard, right, for this university and this football program, that they're going to be able to come back for years to come and be able to say that they helped reestablish the trajectory of South Alabama football is something really special and something we don't take lightly. So love the opportunities that we're creating for ourselves. But I think our consistency in our process is the reason why we're here to this point. And so we want to really stay focused on those things as opposed to just the outcome itself.
Really special what's going on down in Mobile with South Alabama, and just kind of watching that program evolve over the years. Mm-hmm. Of course, Joey Jones kind of got that program started as the first head coach, and they've had several coaches through the years. But Kane Womack has come in and done a fantastic job, and they're knocking on the door of 10 wins this season. And I mean, played UCLA on their home field, very close.
Yep. Lost
a close one to Troy. I mean, what South Alabama has done this year is truly remarkable.
Yeah, lost to a good Troy team by 4. Lost to a really good. I think that win now looks even better against UCLA, considering the kind of year that they've had as well. So this has been unbelievable for them. Once again, 6 wins was their max. Joey Jones hit it a couple of times in his tenure there. Last year, Kane Womack was 5-7. And so to now, you normally see that rise by 1 or 2 games. It's been a steep rise. Now, I know it really hurts them, the fact that they're having this great year, and they still might finish second in their division. But still a fantastic year nonetheless, and a chance to, like I said, get to those double-digit wins and be able to have something they'll be proud of for a very long time in South Alabama.
Yeah, for sure. And so the South Alabama prediction for their bowl game is the Frisco Bowl, and they've projected them to play Fresno State there in the Frisco Bowl.
Yeah, over in Texas. December 17th is the bowl projection laid out by the Action Sports Network. I do think South Alabama, this one really hinges a lot on what happens this weekend. If they were able to get a win there, I think that the Frisco Bowl is probably where they're locked in. I think Troy can move around a little bit with 2 more wins if they can win this upcoming week and then win in the conference championship game. Or if Troy ends up losing one more game and South Alabama gets in, then South Alabama can teeter theirs as well. But if both teams win out, I do believe Troy can bounce around a little bit from a bowl projected standpoint, and South Alabama looks like they're going over to Texas, which would be solid, very, very solid for them, and looking for a really good game there if they're able to lock that in.
Yep, and so South Alabama hosts Old Dominion this week. Over in Conference USA, where the UAB Blazers compete in, they're on the road at Louisiana Tech this week. UAB 5-6 or 3-4 in the conference, playing La Tech, who's 3-8 and 2-8 in the conference. UAB still fighting for a chance to become bowl eligible. They need that win this week.
Yeah, and they're a 17.5-point favorite this week against La Tech. La Tech comes in with a 3-8 record. It's kind of interesting that I think all three teams that we're highlighting here, their opponents, Arkansas State has 3 wins, Old Dominion has 3 wins, and La Tech has 3 wins. For all the opponents of the in-state teams that play FBS football outside of Alabama and Auburn. But UAB is coming off of probably their last game, not the last game against LSU, but their last win against a team kind of in their cuff. That win over North Texas was really, really telling. North Texas, just 2 conference losses, one of them to UAB. We talked about just the fact that UAB just feels really, really unlucky. The games that they lost, they had all been by one possession outside of the one, obviously, against LSU. So a chance to win here, get bowl eligible for themselves, get to that 6th win, and really have something to salvage towards the end of the season. I know it's not the kind of year UAB was hoping to have.
Yeah, because they've kind of established themselves as a bowl team
for sure
over the last few years, and so they're still trying to fight to get that bowl eligibility. But they do have La Tech this week. We'll see if they can get in there. In the FCS, the number 6 Samford Bulldogs, they're on a bye week in the FCS playoffs. They will await Southeastern Louisiana or Idaho. That game's winner on December the 3rd.
Yeah, it's obviously great for Samford. We talked about it last week when Samford played Mercer. One of the things we said was, hey, you can lock up a national seed here and be able to get a first round bye in the playoffs. They did exactly that, got a win over their rivals. And so now a team that you and I got a chance to see, Southeastern Louisiana, a really good football team. They'll play in that first round, and then Samford will have a home game there over in the Homewood area in the FCS playoffs. So if not Jacksonville State being able to do it, you're kind of glad that one team from the state of Alabama is able to march on in the playoffs.
Yeah, certainly good there for the Bulldogs. Alabama State plays host to Arkansas Pine Bluff coming up this Saturday.
Yeah, it's another game where Arkansas Pine Bluff comes in with a 2-8 record. Alabama State should be able to win this game. If they do, they'll move up to 7-4 on the season. So a really solid year for them, and another really good year there in the SWAC. So one more game for them. Most games in the FCS, in the SWAC are done. There's just 2 more basically makeup games, and this is one of them.
And, of course, Jacksonville State finished up their season this past Saturday with a 5-0 conference record, 9-2 overall, unable to make the playoffs because of the transition. And like you mentioned there in the SWAC, Alabama A&M finished up their season at 4-7 and 4-4 in the conference.
Yeah, both teams, obviously, Jacksonville State winning their conference championship ostensibly, and then Alabama A&M, obviously it's been a bit of a rebound year for A&M this season. But, we'll have one more game there in the SWAC, and then on the next season.
We will talk some high school football coming up next. We got a lot of that going on here in the state of Alabama. We'll do that coming up.
All right, Michigan.
WKXX Live, Chase and Gerhard here with you this afternoon. High school football coming up Friday night. You know, when you get to play the day after Thanksgiving, when you're practicing Thanksgiving week, you know you're in a pretty good situation here and a chance to go to the state championship.
Yeah, I was fortunate to be able to do it twice, and it's a different thing altogether. I know schools now, for the most part, are basically done for the entire week.
Yeah.
When we were doing it, we had Monday and Tuesday in school, so it felt normal. Monday and Tuesday did, but Wednesday just felt really weird. And then Thursday, you're basically eating dinner with your team, or eating a meal with your team. Normally, you're in and out of practice. Practice begins pretty early, and you're out of the building, out of the facility, normally by about 3 o'clock or so. Spend some time with the family, and then get ready for Friday. It's a different thing altogether. It's a different week, just in general, and that's the reason why I've always said that, you know, teams that punch their ticket to the state championship, you got to go through a lot of adversity, and coaches hate homecoming week. But I think this one's even weirder than homecoming week in a whole lot of ways, just because of the difference in the way that you have to handle things from a day-to-day standpoint as far as practice goes.
Yeah, and so you done something right, though, if you're playing this time of the year. And we've got some teams right here in Northeast Alabama who have done a lot right this year. We'll give you a full rundown of all the semifinal matchups coming up this week. And we'll start in Class 1A. You've got Coosa Christian at Pickens County. Trip to the state championship on the line. Leroy at Milry, the other 1A game from down south.
Probably the biggest, the best, the most intense school season for Coosa Christian. Being able to punch their ticket to this point, no matter what happens, coming up on Friday. This has been the greatest season since they've been in the AHSAA. Pickens County has been here time after time after time after time. This is that classic thing of Coosa Christian is doing all this for the first time. Pickens County has done this plenty of times before. And so, yeah, it'll be a dynamic matchup. I do think that if you're kind of, evaluating the game, you think you have to like Pickens County.
And in 2A, you got Highland Home at BB Comer. And you've got Pisgah at 5 rematches from earlier this year.
Yeah, I mean, these are a few of these games that are rematches from games season or earlier this season. Pisgah did not have their starting quarterback there in that game. We'll see if they can make up for it here in the matchup this week.
Let's see. In 3A, you've got Sylvania at Piedmont, St. James at Mobile. Christian winners meet in Auburn.
Yep, and another situation where you have another rematch situation with Piedmont and Sylvania. Piedmont won that first game as well.
4A, these two 4A matchups, and I think all of these are going to be great games.
Yeah.
But the action we're going to see in 4A with Andalusia and Catholic Montgomery, that's going to be a showdown. But then Aniana, Cherokee County, again, going to be a showdown. These are two, you could consider both of these state championship games. I mean, the level of play we're going to see.
Yeah, I think that all 4 of these teams can win a state championship. And these are, and another one, once again, keep using the word rematch. This is 2 rematches in this matchup here. Catholic Montgomery beat Andalusia just a few weeks ago, the last week of the regular season, and won that game 45-23. Meanwhile, also Cherokee County and Aniana played a lot earlier in the year. Aniana won that game. So we'll see if the roles get reversed here in this matchup and the differences in the style of play between game 1 and game 2.
And in Class 5A, Charles Henderson travels to Faith Academy, and then Pleasant Grove is at Ramsey.
Charles Henderson, kind of the surprise team right now. I know they've had a great season, but the surprise team to run the table this far into the year. A lot of people thought UMS Wright would be, in this situation, still in and around. But Faith Academy, one of the better teams I would think in Class 5A going into this matchup here against Charles Henderson, and another team in the Rams that have been phenomenal really all year long. And they didn't put up the kind of offensive numbers that they have put up in the past. In this past week's game against Gulf Shores, won that game 20-14. But this is a firepower team from an offensive standpoint.
And in Class 6A, Mountain Brook at Muswell Shoals, Saraland at Theodore.
Saraland Theodore, another one of these rematch games. We'll let you know that in the first game between these two teams, back in week 9 of the season, it was a 27-26 football game that Theodore ended up winning. That was obviously what got them the that got them the region championship. So another rematch there in Class 6A, and then Mountain Brook taking on Muscle Shoals. This is another one of those helmet games. I feel like we've had a lot of these in the first four rounds here of the playoffs. Mountain Brook having a fantastic season. Looking to be a school that dominates in two sports. They've obviously run basketball for a very long time, and now looking to do it same thing in football. Muscle Shoals has been dominant for a very long time in Class 6A football, so they'll have a chance again to continue their winning streak, which right now sits at 6 straight games.
You know, obviously winning the state championship is huge, but I love semifinal games because you win, your season keeps going, and you're in the state championship game. And I know you've been a part of winning semifinal games. I won one as a radio broadcaster. I don't know if that counts.
It does.
Back in 2019, but that feeling when you win a semifinal game and know that you have more football. You're playing football in December.
Right. And you're one of 14 teams that are playing football and still alive. And also there's another thing, Jason, I don't know if you really felt this on the run when Oxford was winning a state championship. The semifinal game has the extra special importance because it really feels like the last traditional high school football game that you play. Now, the state championship, it's another level. It's a bigger level, but it doesn't necessarily have the same ambiance as the high school football game. The last time you get that for all these teams is in the semifinal game. You're playing at a high school stadium, high school atmosphere. You take it to the big stage for the state championship, deservedly so. But this is the last time you play in that kind of atmosphere for the entire year. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And you get into these, and I think it's great that they're able to play the state championships at these big stadiums. But there's a point where it kind of you lose the high school atmosphere being in these big stadiums, even in the 6A, 7A games.
Exactly, and you get a little bit of the same thing in basketball as well when you go from the sub-regionals to the sub-regionals, and then you go to the BJCC. Yes, you do like the bigger stage, but it does lose a little bit of the feel that you've had for the last 14 weeks playing at regular high school football venues. But you obviously like it to be on neutral sites, and if you're going to go neutral sites, go to the 3 best stadiums right now in the state of Alabama.
Yeah, for sure. So high school football semifinals coming up this week. Coming up next, Kevin Skarbinski will join us. We'll talk Iron Bowl on the other side.
The Press Box.
makeup of his team is in a really good space, and I believe that's because of the culture he's curated down there.
For WKXX Live, these guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
Hour number 2 on a Wednesday afternoon on this day before Thanksgiving. Appreciate you joining us here on Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson here. Got Gerhard Mathangani alongside. And we've been talking, getting you ready for the Iron Bowl, a few days away here on this Thanksgiving week. And to talk more, now we welcome on Kevin Skarbinski, a guy who's covered a lot of these Iron Bowls over the years. Kevin, really appreciate you taking time and joining us this afternoon.
Glad to be with you, Chase.
And I know it's that time of the year, the Iron Bowl here in the state of Alabama. What do you look most forward to each year as this game rolls around?
It is the ability of this game to produce a memory or multiple memories that will go down in history. It doesn't happen every year, of course, and it's usually more likely to happen in Auburn than it is in Tuscaloosa, because Alabama pretty much handles its business when it's the Crimson Tide's home game, and I don't think Saturday will be much different in that regard. But it's just amazing how this game produces incredible moments, incredible plays, incredible decisions that we talk about decades and decades later.
No doubt. Kevin, Gerhard here. This might be a difficult question to answer, but I think you might have one. If you were to isolate a player's career and literally just make it the Iron Bowl, so whether it's 2 or 3 or 4, who do you think the best individual player has been in this specific rivalry?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. You know, as much as I thought about this game over the years, I don't know that I've ever really tried to focus on that aspect of it. You know, it's the one name that jumps to mind is Bo Jackson. Now, obviously, he had an incredible career overall at Auburn, but, you know, I'm almost finished with the new biography of Bo, and I was fortunate my first year at the Birmingham News. I became the Auburn beat writer, and that was Bo Jackson's senior year. So I got to cover a lot of newsworthy accomplishments by Bo, a couple of games that didn't go right, and he got hurt, and he was being criticized and questioned. But when he came to the Iron Bowl, he played with 2 cracked ribs and just still had an amazing game. You know, before I got into this business, the Hurricane game in '83, he ran for 256 yards, and nobody moved in Legion Field, even though there was a hurricane. Tornado, I should say. There was a tornado not that far from the stadium. You know, and then, of course, Bo over the top, his first year, Bo, you know, wrong way Bo as a junior, when Auburn had a chance to clinch the SEC and go to the Sugar Bowl, and things went haywire at the goal line. So I don't know that any one player has been involved in more iconic moments in an Iron Bowl or has produced at a higher level over multiple Iron Bowls than Bo Jackson.
We're talking with Kevin Skarbinski. And Kevin, do you know of a time when there has been an interim coach for one of the teams in the Iron Bowl? It seems traditionally like these two teams, there may have been coaches let go following this game, but do you know of a time where there's been an interim coach in the Iron Bowl?
Yeah, the last one I can remember, I guess it would have been Bill Oliver at Auburn in 1998 after Terry Bowden resigned mid-season, and Bill Oliver was the defensive coordinator, and he took over from there. And there was a lot of controversy there. He believed he'd been promised the full-time job after the season. He didn't realize that they already had Tommy Tuberville all wrapped up in the pine box before that, and that's the last one I can remember. I think that it would have been Bill Oliver in '98.
No doubt. This year specifically, Kevin, what are some of the things you are looking out for in this matchup? I feel like the noise around the game, based on where Auburn is and their search for head coach, is kind of taking a lot of the oxygen of this matchup. But how do you see those 4 quarters playing out there in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, you're right about that. What's going to happen either Friday or Sunday, when, barring something really unusual happening between now and then, Lane Kiffin will be announced and or introduced as the Auburn coach. The game itself has certainly taken a back seat. But it's still, can Auburn, with the emotion and the energy and enthusiasm that Cadillac Williams has generated in his short time as the interim coach, is that enough to make you competitive for 4 quarters? Not in Jordan-Hare, where they're a different. They've long been a different team there. Can they do that in Bryant-Denny? The last Auburn team to win there, of course, had a guy named Cam Newton at quarterback, and it took the greatest comeback of all time for certainly in that game's history for Auburn to win that thing. So this Auburn team is woefully under-talented. They're terribly one-dimensional on offense. And it's one thing for Western Kentucky or Texas A&M to know you're going to run the ball, and they still were able to do so with success. When Alabama knows what's coming with their talent, good luck to Tank, Bigsby, and Jarquez Hunter and Robbie Ashford in trying to run the ball on Saturday.
What have you made of this Alabama team this year? And I know 2 losses really comes down to just 2 plays, really. That got them those 2 losses. But what have you made of Nick Saban and Alabama this year?
It seems like more of the same from last year, where they play more close games than we're used to seeing from them. And, of course, a classic example, and I guess why you shouldn't totally write off Auburn on Saturday, is there a more inexplicable game in that series, or maybe in any series, than last year's Iron Bowl? I'm still trying. There's two. It's so contradictory. On the one hand, I'm still scratching my head trying to figure out how did Auburn control that game for 58 minutes and get to the brink of beating an Alabama team that was headed towards the SEC championship game, headed towards the playoff. How were they even able to do that with a team in the midst of what would become a 5-game losing streak? And then how did they actually lose the game when they were in that position? And I will forever argue that one of the things that Brian Harsin should eternally regret in terms of football coaching decisions was not going for 2 after the first overtime. They're the underdog. The longer it goes, the more talented team, the better chance the more talented team has. He could have gone for it. He would have been, imagine the feeling among Auburn people, and we'll never know, of course, but how would it have changed things if he had done that? If he'd gone for 2, forget about Tank staying in bounds and then winning in regulation. But they go to overtime, they go for 2, they win the game right there. How would the world be different in this state in the terms of college football had that happened? We'll never know.
Yeah, I know. It does bring up a lot of interesting what-if scenarios there with Brian Harsin, with Alabama, with everything involved. Yeah, it's excellent stuff. Kevin, you've obviously talked to a lot of participants in this game, whether it's coaches, assistant coaches, players. In light of what we've seen in the Big Ten, when we're Michigan State, the ugly incidents and whatnot, we've seen it in the Egg Bowl, some ugly incidents. It seems to me that this Iron Bowl, that we don't have those necessarily. What do you make of the fact that this game always seems to, despite the rivalry with the fan bases, the game in and of itself and the players in and of themselves seems to have a mutual respect for one another?
They really do, and that's a great point. And it's something that both schools and this state should be proud of. It's another thing that sets the rivalry apart, that makes it as good as it gets. While there's plenty of sniping and backbiting among the fans, you don't see it generally from the players. You don't see it from the coaches. You don't see a lot of back and forth, although that may change with Auburn's new coach. We'll see going forward. But you don't generally see a lot of slings and arrows flying back and forth between Tuscaloosa and Auburn. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. One, although this has changed over the years, especially for Alabama, but when it was a lot of guys from the state who were high school teammates, who were high school rivals, who'd known each other for a long time, maybe friends off the field. They had a mutual respect before they got to those two schools. So it was only natural that would carry over. And as much as they'd want to beat their rivals, they still respected them as individuals and as people. And I think that really set the tone for this rivalry. And even the sniping that we have seen, it's been relatively minor. You can go back to Bear Bryant referring to Auburn as a cow college, or Pat Dye. When they did the deal to move the Iron Bowl to Auburn for the first time in 1989, they did give Alabama they gave one additional game in Legion Field in 91 that should have been Auburn's home game. And Pat Dye said, well, we threw him a bone. We said we let him know we'd play one more in their sandbox. Little things like that. And Ray probably the most contentious period we've ever had was the 4 years Ray Perkins and Pat Dye were going head-to-head. And Ray Perkins vowed he would never take a team to Auburn. He made good on that. He left for Tampa Bay before that ever happened in the NFL. So he wasn't lying. But he took shots. He said the game didn't mean as much to Pat Dye because he hadn't played in it, because he played at Georgia, and meanwhile Ray had been a great receiver at Alabama. So he said the game meant more. That's really the most contentious, I guess, off the field. We've seen this until, of course, I didn't even want to mention the guy's name who decided to murder the trees in Auburn. He doesn't deserve, even though he's no longer with us, he doesn't deserve to have his name mentioned in relation to this incredible rivalry and this incredible game.
Yeah, very true. We're talking with Kevin Skarbinski. You talked about Cadillac Williams earlier, just the energy he's brought to Auburn, being a guy who's, of course, played in this rivalry in his time playing at Auburn. He'll be coaching in this rivalry game on Saturday. Just talk about Cadillac and what he's meant to Auburn, and do you think we'll see him remain on the sideline with the new staff?
It really has been extraordinary to see how he has lifted an entire university, an entire football program, an entire fan base out of the doom and gloom of the last year or so. And I don't know, have we ever seen that before, where we've seen worst to almost first, or first in the SEC with Gus Malzahn from 2012 to 2013, but that was based on results on the field, obviously. And while Auburn's 2-1 under Cadillac, the opponents have not been a murderer's row by any stretch, but just the good feeling that Auburn people have about their football program again, and primarily because of him, because he's genuine, he's authentic, he's not putting on an act. Him moving up and down the sideline, that's real. That's who he is. That school means something to him, and that has resonated. So I think it would be a mistake for Kiffin not to want him to stay for Auburn. And if it's not on the field in some capacity, the real question is, what does Carnell want from his career? And I'm sure he hasn't had time to reflect on this with the whirlwind he's been in. But does he want to be a major college head coach one day? Maybe he would be best off staying there, learning from Kiffin, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and then taking a job elsewhere, maybe a lower level head coaching job, making mistakes at out of the spotlight somewhat, and then who knows? Maybe one day he would be ready to come back, and he would certainly be embraced as he's been just as the interim coach.
Yeah, he has done a remarkable job stepping in and reviving this team for this last part of the season. Kevin Skarbinski talking with us this afternoon. Kevin, really appreciate you taking time with us, talking some Iron Bowl, and really appreciate your time, and we'll have to do it again real soon.
That sounds good. Thank you, guys, and I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much. You as well.
Thanks, Kevin.
Kevin Skarbinski, former Birmingham News writer, now with AL.com, the lead.com as well, covering college sports, has covered college football here in the state of Alabama for a long time. And I love how confident old Scarbo is that Lane Kiffin is the next head coach at Auburn.
I think if you're an Auburn fan, you listen to that, you maybe felt a little sour about the game, but really good about your future because because there was a lot of confidence there, and you're starting to get a lot of that over the last about 10 days or so, and it looks like Mr. Skarbinsky's right in the fold of thinking that it's only a matter of time before Lane Kiffin makes his way over to Auburn.
Yeah, and so that's something I definitely took out of that interview, because he was a Auburn beat writer for a long time, so he still has some connections down there on the Plains. So appreciate Kevin Skarbinski for joining us this afternoon. We will grab a timeout here. We'll come back and we'll dive into a little college basketball coming up. Mark Everett Kelly will join us as well, talk more Iron Bowl. We will do that as we continue.
Alana was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma.
stage for the big game. But there's lots of college basketball happening this time of the year, and as we get into to Thanksgiving break and everything, we see more of these teams going to these destination tournaments, and how nice of Auburn to head down to Cancun. So, and I know our friend Andy Burcham and Brad Law are enjoying Cancun right now.
Oh yeah, very strategic scheduling. I kind of like it. Right before the holidays, to be able to get some sun in and some great basketball in as well. And Auburn was able to do that the other day. But yeah, you always love to see, at this time of year, being able to go out, whether it's Maui or Cancun, be able to kind of get a destination game. And it does serve, outside of the fact that you're going to beautiful weather and, going to play basketball, it does serve as yet another one of these bonding moments for these basketball teams to be able to get the chemistry going here in the early part of the season. So yeah, it's good for our buddies, and I sometimes wish I lived vicariously through them as they make the trip out and have some fun and some sun, and being able to enjoy not only that but some great basketball as well.
Yes, and a good win over Bradley for Auburn yesterday afternoon, 85-64 there in Cancun.
Yeah, and obviously, had a chance to play really well against the team that's expected to compete in their league. Of course, they didn't play great yesterday. They were a little bit shorthanded. Bruce Pearl even said as much, and this was not necessarily a great, huge challenge for Auburn. This was a challenge for Auburn to be able to continue to play well. They'll have a few games over a few days, and obviously getting themselves ready for SEC play coming up in the next about month or so, and another kind of a notch there to find, who are the guys in the main rotation for this basketball team. So I think they found some answers yesterday and being able to do so against a solid team, and then they'll play another team that is out of the Power Five when they face Northwestern coming up in their next game.
And Bruce Pearl had a chance to talk to the media all the way from Cancun.
Yeah, he did, thanks to Zoom. Obviously, one of the big things about the pandemic is we learned very quickly about how to get together and have press conferences online via technology. So yeah, Zoom was the way that Bruce Pearl was able to chat with some local reporters, the ones that stayed stateside, and he talked about the win over Bradley yesterday.
It's a good win. Our bench was really good. Our starters started well. I thought Coach Flanagan and Coach Pruitt did an outstanding job with the preparation. We had some difficulty guarding some of those guys one-on-one. Some of the guards drove us downhill and got to the rim too easily. That's going to be an issue for us. Our guards staying in front. I thought we shot it well. I thought most of it was in rhythm. When we ran offense and we got the right spacing, we got good looks. We took care of the ball. When we got out of character and the wrong guys bringing the ball up the floor, just scrambling around, we weren't nearly, as productive. But it's good to see us shoot the ball in rhythm, and it was good. It was good to see us oftentimes get really good looks. Thought we could have done a way better job on the offensive glass. We didn't dominate like I think we could have. We only get 8 offensive rebounds, but we shot it pretty well.
Bruce Pearl there in their win against Bradley yesterday there in Cancun. Jacksonville State got a good win last night over Elon there at Pete Matthews Coliseum. You heard that game here on Fox Sports 102.9 as the Gamecocks again got the win 78-53. It was close, but the Gamecocks kind of got wide open in the second half. Elon really not good offensively in the second half, and that gave Jacksonville State a chance to kind of extend that lead.
Yeah, they struggled there, and JSU took prime advantage of that. And it's one of those situations, to me, I think that JSU, and it's another kind of notch for them. Elon is a team that's perpetually one of the league leaders in their league, and we've seen them a bunch of times on the March Madness bracket, but only got 53 points yesterday, you said, in the matchup. But JSU used a really solid end of the first half, beginning of the second half, a 22-0 run at one point in that game to really kind of help spurn the lead for them and ended up getting the win. So there's been times where the JSU offense hasn't looked at its top shape. I think it looked really, really good yesterday, being able to get those 78 points.
Yeah, I think so as well. So some great college basketball, and Alabama will get going in the Phil Knight Invitational over in Oregon. As we talked with Roger Hoover last week, he is up in Oregon for the week there with the Crimson Tide basketball team on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. But they will get going against Michigan State, a really good team there. Who we saw on the national stage get a win against Kentucky last week. But Alabama takes on Michigan State there in the Phil Knight Invitational. We got to jump to a break here. Mark Everett Kelly will join us, talk the Iron Bowl, coming up next.
The Press Box, where the biggest name
We're back here on WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani joining you here as the Iron Bowl, a hot topic this week, getting ready for the big game on Saturday in Tuscaloosa. To talk some Iron Bowl with us now, we bring on our friend Mark Everett Kelly, former researcher with ESPN. Mark, always great to talk with you. How are you today?
Great. Nice to hear from you guys. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. And excited about what's to come this weekend with the Iron Bowl, really all the rivalry games. What stands out to you? I know you're not here from the state of Alabama, but now with your time in New York, did you kind of know the Iron Bowl, keep up with the rivalry at all?
Yeah, I think this goes back to a long time. I mean, Alabama-Auburn is special because of the rivalry between the two schools. Obviously, it goes back to the 1800s. So that type of rivalry and that type of competition, year by year, especially this, everyone knows this weekend is the weekend of the game, and so there's not too many other things going on that Saturday. And Alabama's usually in the hunt for a national title, and you've been going back and with Bear Bryant or Gene Stallings, they've always been one of the better teams in college football. And then Auburn has, kind of made their way to where they've shown that they are a rival that needs to be taken seriously because they've knocked them off in some really big games and really done some damage to Alabama to ruin national championship hopes. So, even in New York, this rivalry resonates.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I know you put together some presentations here, some local presentations in the East Alabama area, letting people know about some of the things that they might not know as far as the intricate details of this rivalry. What are some of the things that you've gleaned and maybe some of the numbers that stick out to you as it relates to this particular game and maybe some things that most people don't know going into this matchup?
But the rivalry, I wanted to find out really how this all started. Like, why was there such animosity? And it depends who you talk to. Some fans are better than others, obviously. But this game, determines how usually fans act the rest of 364 other days of the year. So in the 1860s, there was a thing called the Morrill Land Grant Act, which the United States then would lend out over 240,000 acres of land to develop agricultural colleges. And the University of Alabama thought, well, we're the premier university in the state. We should get it. And then there was a little college called East Alabama Male College, which turned into Auburn, who also applied for it. And they wound up winning the bid. They got the land, and they developed, Auburn to what we know today. And I think that's kind of where it started. And then, the first game was in 1893, and the difference there was one team had it as the first game on their schedule, another team had it on the last game on their schedule. But that's kind of just where it began. Then there was a 40-year hiatus between 1907 and 1948 because they couldn't determine how much to pay referees and how much players should get per diem per game. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that if they didn't play all those years, they tried to make some state legislation that they would play, but the only thing that got them back together was that they finally said, okay, we're going to withhold state funds unless you guys play. And then all of a sudden the rivalry came back. And then it really became, since 1948, Alabama's won 44, all of them, Auburn has won 30. And that's where it's really taken off.
Really interesting stuff there. We're talking with Mark Everett Kelly. And, you mentioned this game and how far it goes back. What's interesting to me about the Iron Bowl is that so many times this game has meant so much of maybe who comes out of the SEC West, who represents the SEC championship. I mean, it always seems like there's bigger things on the line following this game.
Yeah, and here's another interesting thing about that is that in 1994 you had a matchup between an Auburn team that was undefeated, they were 9-0-1, and an Alabama team that was undefeated. And ABC had the choice of airing that game or Ohio State, Michigan. Just happened to be on the same day. And they made a choice to air Ohio State, Michigan, even though the games were at different times of the day. So the national audience didn't get to see Alabama, Auburn, even though both teams were undefeated. It was only the second time that happened since 1971. So, just a game like that which was a great game, and Alabama wound up winning, and stopped Auburn. Auburn tried to come back. That kind of game has meaning overall to individuals, but that didn't get seen nationally. Normally the game is nationally, and then like in 2013 with the WKXX, that ruined Alabama's perfect season, ruined their chance for a three-peat. And then you had 2019 where Alabama could have got back and played LSU in a playoff if they would have won that game. 2017 where you have Auburn winning, then Alabama still winning the national championship. So there's a lot of things that it attracts national audience, but also makes people here. Even if you beat them, Auburn beat them that one year in 2017. And Alabama wound up getting, so to speak, the last laugh and on the national stage, but they didn't win the game down here. So even with all that, there's so much that goes into all these games that make it worthwhile for everybody to watch. And that's what makes it so special and important to each of the fans down here.
For sure. This is one of the things I asked our previous guest, Kevin Skarbinski, and I don't know if your research has kind of gotten you into the nitty gritty of the stats, but if you were just to take a player's career from just the Iron Bowl, who in your opinion maybe have like just the isolated game, probably some of the best games on the resume? He pitched Bo Jackson. Obviously I think Cam Newton would have one, but he's got a 1-game sample size. If you were to maybe pick out a handful of games who've just had a really good career in this particular game, who would you point to?
Okay, well, here's the interesting. Since 2000, okay, only one Auburn player has rushed for more than one TD in a game. Cadillac Williams in 2002 rushed for 2 touchdowns in a game. First one was an 80-yard touchdown, first play of the game. You would think that Auburn can run the ball better for touchdowns against Alabama, but since 2000, that's the only player to rush for more than 1 touchdown in a game against them. But for Alabama, definitely A.J. McCarron, 10 touchdowns, no interceptions in his career against Auburn. Then you have obviously Bo Jackson with Bo over the top, and then he actually ran a long way in 1984. But he always had like 256 yards in one game against them. Then you have Amari Cooper, who had a 99-yard touchdown reception from A.J. McCarron, which is the longest play in Alabama history, and he had over 200 receiving yards in a game against them. Derrick Henry, when he rushed the ball by 270 yards against Auburn in one of the highest scoring games ever. Then you have Nick Marshall, too, passing 439 yards in one game against Alabama. So individually, you have a lot of accomplishments, and whether it's an Auburn quarterback that normally wouldn't throw for too many yards because you don't think of them passing for too many yards. But when I crunch the numbers, Auburn holds individual records in games. Alabama holds the overall higher number when you go from, especially in the meetings since Nick Saban, in the 15 meetings since then. Alabama has the advantage in every category overall, but Auburn has the individual advantage in each of the games.
Interesting stuff there. Mark Everett Kelly joining us this afternoon, previewing the Iron Bowl coming up Saturday afternoon. As far as coaches go, we've seen great coaches at both places. I think it's been since '98 since we've seen an interim coach in this rivalry game. Both teams traditionally keeping their coaches through the entire season. So this is kind of a rarity to see an interim coach on one side of this rivalry.
Yeah, but remember back in 2020, I believe Saban sat this game out, I think, because of COVID. So I think Sarkisian coached the game. But under Cadillac Williams, Auburn's gotten back to running the ball. Right? Under him, they've rushed for over almost 260 yards a game, and they're also running the ball like close to 42 times a game. That's not something they did early in the year where they only rushed for 170 yards. It's just not Auburn-like. So he's kind of gotten them back to what Auburn does well, and they've even stopped the run pretty well in the last couple of games, which they weren't doing early in the season. That's I think what was the most glaring factor about Harsin is that they weren't doing what Auburn normally does well and what Auburn has become known for. So Cadillac is part of the rivalry. I mean, you heard him say some great things about Saban, and I think he has the respect there. But he also knows, hey, if I win this game, this can be something that can put me in this position permanently. And then you have guys like Gus Malzahn who only beat Saban 3 times, only 1 or 2 guys, him and Les Miles, ever beat Saban 3 times here at Alabama. So winning against Alabama can make or break your career for that moment, and whether or not you get another chance to coach in the game next year. So we'll see what happens. But I think Cornell has a very good ability to, especially with the fans, he gives them something that reminds them of better times. With him and Ronnie Brown, they were a dominant running team. And I think a lot of that is where Auburn gets their identity. So I think this is a good spot for him. If he can win this game, this will really make it hard for them not to give him a job.
No doubt. It's in Tuscaloosa once again this year. I know that it's basically a small sample size there in Tuscaloosa because a lot of games were there in Birmingham. What do you feel about this matchup, kind of going back to the campus of the University of Alabama? And then how do you see Saturday's matchup playing out?
Yeah, well, Alabama usually wins home games. I mean, the only game I can remember them losing at home was a comeback in 2010, where when he goes to Jordan Hare, Saban's 4-7 in his career lifetime at Jordan Hare, which is really, really uncharacteristic for Saban. So it's the last game they played there in 2020. We're talking one of Alabama's the best offenses ever in college football, and they laid it on Auburn pretty good. But I think going back to last year, where Auburn really played them well and looked like they were going to win until the last couple minutes of the game, that's kind of stayed in their minds a little bit, and they want to. Maybe they like playing for Cardinal Williams. They want to make sure he gets a good showing. And I think this will be closer, even though Alabama's average 40 points a game. Look, they only have 2 losses by 4 points, right? So everybody wants to, Alabama's not doing great. Alabama's something different this year. When you consider how good Tennessee is, and when you consider LSU won the West, to lose 2 games by 4 points, that's not really that bad. So, I don't think Alabama had such a fall off as some have said in the national media. This is beating Alabama is a big deal even now, even though they have 2 losses and aren't going to be in the national playoff. And that's what makes this game so important for both sides, is that Alabama can't lose because they are who they are. And even though they kind of taken a step back, that they still got to prove that. And then Auburn, this could put them in very good position for recruiting and other things going into next year.
Great stuff. Mark Everett Kelly joining us, former researcher there at ESPN, talking the Iron Bowl with us. Mark, as always, appreciate you taking some time, hopping on with us, and looking through the Iron Bowl with us. We'll get you on again soon, but appreciate your time today.
Hey, always a pleasure to talk to you guys. You guys be good. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark.
Mark Everett Kelly joining us here on WKXX Live. We will jump to a break here, come back, talk more college football, look at some bowl projections. We'll do that on the other side.
Surge Staffing has hundreds of immediate
Fox Sports 102.9, WKXX Live. Jason Gerhard here with you on this Wednesday afternoon. Getting ready to turn you loose on Thanksgiving coming up tomorrow. We'll be back with you on Friday to preview more of the Iron Bowl. But we got some bowl predictions out following last night's college football playoff rankings as we are looking at the actionnetwork.com. Brett McMurphy, who's been covering college football for a long time, has kind of put these together. There's still some bowl openings, 7, I believe, to be exact, with 13 teams on the verge of 6 wins. And you got Buffalo, UAB, Louisiana, and Southern Miss all favored in their games this week.
Yeah, and we talked about UAB a little bit earlier, taking on Louisiana Tech. We think that's a game that UAB can win. They got to go on the road, but you know, the carrot dangle of that 6th win and a possible bowl bid, to me, I think will be enough. As big favorite, 17.5 points there in that one. So a chance there for all the teams that you just mentioned as the favorites to go and get that 6th win. And bowl eligibility is important, not necessarily because of the bowl you're playing in, but because of the extra month of practice, and that's what the coaches really love.
Yeah, for sure. And so looking at some of the bowl projections here, Brett McMurphy has Georgia, Ohio State playing for the national championships out in L.A. In the Peach Bowl, he's got Georgia, USC, Ohio State, TCU.
That'd be 1 Georgia, 4 USC, which would be interesting, and then of course 2 Ohio State and 3 TCU. If that were to play out, this one's obviously the hardest to maneuver because you're having to deal with multiple games here. Georgia has to play a couple more games. USC has to play a couple more games. So does Ohio State and TCU. I do think if you just take a look at the favorites, though, this looks like it could be your 1, 2, 3, 4. Bama fans wanting some chaos, obviously. Yeah. LSU fans wanting, obviously, to knock off Georgia and slide a spot in. But I don't hate Brett McMurphy's projections there with 1 through 4.
In the New Year's 6 bowl games, he has got projected Oregon, Michigan in the Rose Bowl, with Michigan a 7-point favorite, and Tennessee, Tulane in the Cotton Bowl, and Tennessee being a 7-point favorite.
It's good because it keeps the Rose Bowl, that classic matchup with Pac-12 and Big Ten, and they obviously want to be able to still keep that even with the expanded playoff. And I'm not going to get into that because Rose Bowl game needs to get over themselves. But at the same time, too, you also have those other games, and I think the Tulane game is the really interesting one because the Tulane-Tennessee game, because Tulane will more than likely be playing against a Tennessee team, on a backup quarterback, and so a chance there. Maybe Tulane sees that game as a possible chance to knock off an SEC opponent.
Projected in the Sugar Bowl, the All-State Sugar Bowl, Kansas State, LSU, and then in the Capital One Orange Bowl, Clemson and Alabama.
Where have we heard that matchup before? Once again, it'd be another one, not the same marquee game that we're used to having, but that game would be right before Christmas, or I think New Year's Eve on the 30th. So I think it would probably get a little bit more eyeballs going into that matchup. And K-State, LSU, it would be a good consolation prize, I think, for both teams. K-State getting on the cusp of a Big 12 championship, not being able to get in. Same thing with LSU on the cusp of winning an SEC championship, but not being able to prevail against Georgia.
And for the other bowl games, like we were talking in the break, they'll put any name. If your business wants to be on the name of a bowl game, no worries. It can be. There are some interesting names out here, and I think that's a pretty interesting matchup. It's just the first one I see in the Citrus Bowl, Ole Miss, Penn State.
Yeah, it could be interesting. And if you take our buddy Skarbinski's projection there, it'd be an interim head coach in there in that matchup, or maybe a guy being auditioning for that job there at Ole Miss, where they just take on Penn State there. So another one of those games where that's exactly where I could see the Rebels.
In the Cheez-It Bowl, he has projected Notre Dame, Oklahoma. That's a helmet game there in the Cheez-It Bowl.
No doubt about it. I mean, I think that you obviously take two teams that are not necessarily playing to their overall standards. I think a lot of people thought Oklahoma could be a team that probably plays into the playoff. But if you're able to get that game on the Cheez-It Bowl, it's a good, as you mentioned, helmet game, good traditional game. And once again, it kicks off a couple days before New Year's Eve.
And projected in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl up in Memphis, Baylor and Auburn. And Baylor, a 7.5-point favorite.
Yeah, I don't think, obviously, Brett Murphy, I don't think he's projecting Auburn to beat Alabama. So they could be one of the few teams that get in with a 5-7 record, get in with those 5 wins. Because of the bowl layout this year, you need 82 teams in to be able to play bowls. And they're probably, unless everything breaks, where all of the underdogs and the favorites all win Saturday, we more than likely won't have 82 teams that have won 6 games. So Auburn, you would think, would be one of the very first calls to fill in as a 5-win team.
Yeah, and like we mentioned when we were talking about some of the in-state teams, he's got Troy projected in the New Orleans Bowl against North Texas. He's got South Alabama projected to the Frisco Bowl against Fresno State. And he's got UAB projected to play Miami of Ohio in the Bahamas Bowl. We may have to go cover that one on December the 16th.
It'd be the second time in a few years where UAB made that Bahamas Bowl game. And honestly, if you're not playing in one of the top 4 games, but basically the top 3 games, the 2 semifinal games and the championship, to me, the fun destinations are those ones. It's the Bahamas Bowl, and it's the nice venues. And I mean, this is no disrespect to the Fenway Bowl, but I don't know if I want to be spending December in Boston, where Purdue and East Carolina are projected to go to the Fenway Bowl. So I mean, I like being able to play in those environments, but if it's on me, I want a destination game. I want Hawaii, the Bahamas, some of these venues.
And if you just like going over maybe to Protective Stadium and watching the Birmingham Bowl, he's got Memphis and Southern Miss projected to be there in the Birmingham Bowl, and then down in Montgomery at Crampton Bowl and the Camellia Bowl, they've got Appalachian State and Eastern Michigan projected.
Yeah, I think if you're a fan of college football, some pretty solid games there. A chance to watch Appalachian State, the team that beat Texas A&M to start the year. I know they haven't had the kind of season that they wanted to have after that big upset victory, but yeah, it looks like 2 pretty solid games. We'll know a little bit more after this week, but 2 solid games here in the state of Alabama in bowl season.
Well, that is some bowl projections for you. We will have lots of college football talk coming up on Friday as we will get you ready for rivalry weekend. That is all the time we have for you today. We want to say thank you as we get ready to celebrate Thanksgiving. Thank you for listening to us each and every day. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving day tomorrow. We will talk to you on Friday.